Hello. Today I will be featuring probably one of the most interesting tier 10 cruisers, which is of course the Des Moines. The US tier 10 really powerful cruiser. The matchmaking isn't that nice to me. They have 4 tier 10 battleships, including 2 Yamatos, and they also have 2 Des Moines, and overall they have a bunch of crap that isn't too fun to face as a Des Moines player, especially the 2 Yamatos, because Yamatos of course overmatch all the armor I have. Now, for those that aren't aware of the changes that has happened in 0.6.4, is that they have increased the deck armor from 27mm to 30mm. And this is important because you actually no longer eat all those random pens from all other battleships, except of course the 2 I happen to be facing, Yamato. Yamato's 460mm guns can still overmatch your armor without issues. And all the other ones can also overmatch your bow armor because it's still only 27mm. So not really the best matchmaking, and the buff is a small one, but it is quite a nice one because it prevents you from eating a bunch of random pens from everything except the LOL pen machine, which is of course the Yamato, which is probably one of the most stupid designs in this entire game. I don't really like the Yamato design because they decide to give it these LOL pen guns, but then they also decide to give it some of the best armor in the game, and they decide to give it the best Sigma in the game. At some point you'd think that they would realize that, whoa, we're giving kind of a lot of goodies to one single ship, but whatever. I wait undetected until the Des Moines gives broadside, and that's when I punish him, score a Citadel. A bunch of other people also score Citadel, so he gets instantly killed. You might notice that I switched ammo in about a second there from HE to AP, and that's because I run Steven Seagal as my captain on the Des Moines, and I run Expert Loader. And this means that I switch ammo type 75% faster than you normally would, which of course with a 5.5 second reload means that you switch ammo in around a second, a bit more than a second. So very quick ammo switching. The Benson drops a smoke, which at first glance looks quite tempting, but there's a Chapayev on my left, and I'm in his radar range, and there's a Des Moines that is now undetected that was pushing up that could also radar me. So ultimately I don't really dare to stop and park in the smoke. There are some cruisers in which you can angle tank. For example, the Moskva is very good at tanking while angled. The Zhao has the troll armor that you can get away with all of these pretty silly situations. But the Des Moines, even though with the recent buffs to the armor, it's still a very squishy cruiser. I mean, it compensates by having the longest duration radar, it has insane HE and AP DPM, it has massive anti-air, but in return it has a pretty large Citadel and it is quite squishy, so I do not dare to stay here. I do not dare to stay in that smoke. I instead just straight up bail while landing shells on this Des Moines that's fleeing. Now, the way they've actually rebalanced or buffed the Des Moines is something I really like. People often accuse wargaming of making these huge, massive, sweeping changes at once, but the Des Moines is actually a really good example of balancing done right. They have been incrementally giving it very small buffs, and then checking how it performs, and then buffing it some more, then checking how it performs, and it's really starting to get to the point where I consider it I always considered the Des Moines a very strong ship, but it's significantly less frustrating to play these days when you don't eat those super random pens. Now, in the beginning, the Des Moines actually had 25mm deck and bow armor, but then they buffed it to 27mm, only a 2mm buff, not a big buff, and then they checked how it performed. Then they wanted to increase the DPM a bit since a bunch of new ships had come out, like for example the Minotaur, which had massive DPM. So they buffed the reload from 6 seconds to 5.5. Not a big change once again. In fact, in the past, if you shot 10 volleys in a minute, after the buff you could shoot almost 11 in a minute. So very small buff, but still a buff. And now they've done the next incremental small change, which is that they changed the deck armor further from 27 to 30mm. So they are very slowly but clearly buffing this ship and then checking how it performs. And I actually really like that approach because it's becoming more and more comfortable and more fun to play. And now, the Des Moines itself, as I said, you can't really angle tank in it, so you kind of want to keep moving, and in general you want to play it like an oversized Atlanta, which is what you're seeing me do here. I park behind these islands and I just lob shells over the islands, and I stay angled as much as possible if I do get spotted, so I won't get completely nailed, and in general I just kite away. One of the greatly underestimated features of the Des Moines is its fire starting capabilities. For those that aren't aware, it's actually the best fire starter at tier 10. Now that's no joke. It's even a better fire starter than the Zao. The reason why this is of course quite often ignored is because the arcs aren't easy to master, and it's not as easy to consistently land shells as with the Zao. But if you are able to consistently land shells, it starts, I think, something like 13 to 14 fires per minute, which is absolutely insane. And the reason for this is of course the heavy 203mm shells have a very high fire chance, and they already do a nice chunk of HE damage to begin with. So the combination means that you're starting a lot of fires. This Grosse Corvus, I already started 2 fires, he repaired them. I already have another 2 fires burning on him. So he's not having a good time, and that's because he tried to angle tank and against the battleship in front of him, and that would have worked just fine, but I was here, and a parked battleship is of course a very juicy target for the Des Moines. He has 3 fires, so I ignore him and I start working on the Montana, because the Montana kind of has my broadside, and that's of course very scary. I am undetected, which is the only reason why I'm giving this much broadside, otherwise I would be a lot more angled when fighting him. The Montana also doesn't have the massive armor of the Grosse Corvus, which means my HE shells will be dealing a lot more direct damage. Now, Des Moines cannot pen 50mm armor with the HE, not even with IFHE, and the Grosse Corvus has a 50mm deck, so that's why you saw so many shatters against him. Using IFHE doesn't change this, so it's a pretty much pointless perk for this one. The Henry IV, on the other hand, with IFHE will be able to penetrate 50mm, which makes it quite interesting. I do get briefly spotted, not really sure what it is that's spotting me, and while I focus on radaring the Shima and trying to help my team up here, I for a second lose track of the Montana, who reminds me instantly by citadeling me with his, I think his back guns or something. So I was thinking it was that Udaloy that was spotting me through that small gap. That's why I had no idea what it was that was actually spotting me. So I get punished instantly, and that's kind of what I mean. Unlike the Zao, which will have troll armor and often not get citadeled, in the Des Moines, if you give broadside, you will get citadeled extremely easily. This Montana has used his damage gun, which is the only reason why I'm using HE here. AP would probably deal more damage, more consistent damage at this point, but I'm being kind of stubborn here since he's used his repair, and I just want to make sure he dies, and fires will secure the kill. But AP would deal a lot more direct damage. I'll probably be able to show it later on when I get some broadside battleship, and I can show you just how punishing the US AP is on this ship. But at this point, since my previous location has kind of gone up in flames, so to say, I can no longer safely sit there. I'm just going to kite further away and start working on the battleships. This is why, of course, I run the range module on the Des Moines. You want to be able to deal damage at these long ranges. Yes, you won't have an easy time hitting cruisers at long ranges, but the reason you run this range mod is more for the battleships, to be able to be effective at long ranges. The reload mod is nice, but only for close ranges, and the problem is that there are so many bad maps in this game, well, bad cruiser maps in this game, that if you end up getting something like Tears of the Desert, Mountain Range, Okinawa, Ocean, you end up getting these maps as a Des Moines. Even this map, Atlantic, isn't really that good unless you go up here to this northern cap. It really isn't that fun on a Des Moines. So there are all these terrible maps for cruisers, and if you run reload mod, unless you have a buddy, a division mate ready to smoke you up, you're not going to be having a lot of fun. You're going to be struggling to get within range to be useful. In fact, already here 3 people are shooting at me as I'm trying to burn this Yamato from very far away. And yeah, unless you have a division mate, I don't really recommend a reload mod, simply because the map design doesn't support it. You could get lucky and get maps like North or Hotspot, or maps where you can get into close range and really use that DPM, but you're kind of basing your success on a lot of RNG. This is of course unless you have a division mate. With division mates it's different, but I'm playing solo in this game, so ultimately for the solo player out there, I really don't recommend a reload mod at all. It's too map reliant, whereas the thing that I like the most about the Moines, especially when you run the range mod, is that it has quite a lot of versatility. If the enemy has a lot of DDs or smoked up Royal Navy cruisers, your radar will be highly punishing. If they have a carrier, your insane anti-air will melt the planes and provide a massive AA bubble around you. If it's an open map and the enemy has battleships, well, you can kind of play like I do here. You kite, you sit at range, and you just spam HE with your great fire chance on them. You have a lot of options. You have a lot of versatility. The slow shell velocity takes some getting used to, but then again, if you have grinded through the Baltimore, which has the same shell velocity, you should be pretty used to it. And honestly, the Baltimore, especially after the buffs, isn't a bad ship at all, and it kind of prepares you for the Des Moines, since they have very similar profiles, very similar shell velocity, and so forth. It's also quite a monster now, the Baltimore. Chapayev pops up. Gonna see if I can nail him with AP, but he is already turning away, so it's going to be unlikely. The AP pen is of course fantastic on the Des Moines. It's one of its strengths. You can just pour in citadels on people if you do get the chance. This guy, he's just kiting away, and the reason I'm turning broadside to him this sharply was because a Yamato popped up behind him. So I do not want to. I want to keep the island between me and the Yamato to make it awkward for him to shoot me. Switching to HE. I do get some pens on the Chapayev in the end, but I'm gonna start working on the Yamato instead, that's pushing up. You see that Chapayev is turning broadside now. He thinks he's safe because I'm focusing on the Yamato. I'm perfectly okay with this, because I can easily catch him off guard at any point. You can't give this much broadside to a Des Moines. Popping radar to see what's shooting me. Spot the Des Moines on the other side. And in between this, I switched ammo type. And that's of course the danger, especially when Adrenaline Rush has kicked in and you see my reload is 4.6 or something. So if you give broadside in a slow turning cruiser like the Chapayev, it only takes me 4.6 seconds to switch ammo or for the next volley, and if you're giving broadside, well, you're gonna eat AP, like he did, instantly citadel. And now I finally get to show off, of course, one of the strengths. When you get close to a battleship, the Des Moines is very, very scary and shouldn't be underestimated. This is a slightly angled Yamato. He ate a 9k damage just from those pens. So much damage. The enemy Des Moines shows up, which is a bit unfortunate here. He does get a volley off on me before I can shoot him, but I managed to trade the kill on him. And at this point, the score is ticking out. They put quite a lot of effort into killing me off. And look, 998, the Yamato will survive, but the game does end. And looking at the damage, 230,000 damage is of course always nice. Only 5 citadels, 13 fires, isn't really that much, but I always made sure that I stayed on the same target, meaning after I forced the battleship to use his repairs, I got multiple fires on him afterwards, which meant that they all ticked for the full duration. That is why I got Witherer with only 13 fires, because I made sure they hit the same target. And team score wise, 2.3k base XP, not that much. Special mention to Pookie, the Benson. He was only a tier 8, and I checked his stats, they weren't really that special, but his smokes in this game were actually really, really good. And multiple times they helped out, well, not just me, but also helped out a bunch of the battleships at the northern cap, since I could kind of use those as vision blocks. Even though I didn't sit in the smokes themselves, I often used them as vision cover, so I kind of used them as an artificial mountain, and I shot over the smoke since I was afraid to hide in it because of all the enemy radars. Moving on to detailed report. Damage upon your spotting, 94,000. That is of course the combination of radar and the overall spotting I did. Potential damage, 1.5 million, not that much. But more interesting is of course the damage done. 96k in HE, 50k in AP, although I didn't even use AP much, I still got 50k damage, and the 13 fires 84,000. And you can see the big targets that ate a lot of damage. The Kurfürst at the start who tried to push in. I set 2 fires on him, he repaired. I set 3 fires before I moved to the Montana and started shooting him. And that's kind of what you want to do, because you have the potential to start those fires so very, very quickly. So if someone uses a repair while staying within your gun range, you can punish them very heavily, especially if you're able to bring all 3 turrets to bear, which doesn't happen too often, since oftentimes you're spotted and you have to be careful with your angling. Anyway, that was my commentary on the latest updated Des Moines. I'll go over my build, since I don't think I've covered the Des Moines in I don't know, couple of months maybe. Anyway, moving on to my recommended build for this ship. Right, starting off, we of course have the modules. Well, not much to talk about since it's a tier 10. Priority wise, premium damage control, followed by premium repair, and then premium radar, and don't use any of the fighters, please, for the love of God, and premium defensive AA. Upgrade wise, well, important here, you don't need Hydra on this ship, because you have radar and they overlap, and you have such insane AA, it's a waste to not have defensive AA to basically be able to shred any planes that ever come near you. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, AA range, gun range, because the default range is so anemic, damage control system mod 1, because you don't really lose engine or rudder, damage control system mod 2, mostly because the rudder shift on the ship is, in my opinion, good enough that you can get away with running this. So I don't actually run the... this is one of the few cruisers in the entire game where I don't run steering gears too. And finally, concealment system, because, well, getting your concealment down to 10.6 is incredibly important for your own survival. Much more valuable than running, for example, the surveillance thing. I don't see it. 40% to the action time. Usually, the radar already lasts so long. You gotta consider the radar already lasts 40 seconds. So if you haven't killed your target in 40 seconds, he will probably have fled from your radar range by the time it's done anyway. So I don't really see the value of increasing the duration at all, because, especially considering the cost, you're giving up concealment for something. If you give up concealment, you're more easy to spot, which means the DDs have more time to react and dodge and get the hell out anyway. So honestly, just an awful trade-off and not something I recommend. Captain perks wise, still using the same. Priority wise, we get priority target first. Adrenaline rush, we don't need extreme marksman, because the turret traverse is already quite good at 30 seconds. And followed it up with the superintendent. We need additional heal and additional radar. Then we get concealment expert. That's the basic 10 points. At this point, I will probably get advanced firing training first to get that 7.2 km range on your anti-air, and then follow it up with demolition expert for additional fire chance. And note, this is only if you run Steven Seagal as your captain. Then I recommend getting preventive maintenance, because you lose turrets quite often, or well, they get damaged quite often. And finally, expert loader. That's why I was able to switch ammo type in a second, because Steven Seagal has a buffed expert loader. Every other captain has 50%, Steven Seagal has 75% to the reload time. So this is why this is especially strong. If you're not using Steven Seagal on the Des Moines, then with the last 2 points, getting either Jack of all trades or expert marksman are both viable options. Jack of all trades might actually be more valuable, since the buff in turret traverse isn't really that big. Ultimately though, this is especially for Steven Seagal, because this expert loader buff is so massive. Anyway, that was my Des Moines updated commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.